right, welcome back to another episode of Cantina Chronicles. This is a special one. This is the finale of Ahsoka we're discussing today. This is episode 8, The Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord. Sadly, Adam made it back to the known galaxy. Ben and I still stuck out here in Peridia.
All by ourselves.
So we're potting alone today, but we're
Yes,
together.
we've got each other, and
That's
we've got a
important.
mission, and we're here to accomplish it, man.
I'm pumped, man. Like I've read a few articles. I've seen some coverage of the finale and what people thought, and you know, there's some people who are, I guess going after some of the narrative choices and the character choice and things like that. But I actually overall enjoyed the series as a whole, and so no one episode could really weigh it down for me because there's been so many high
Yeah,
points. So we'll talk about this episode. I definitely have critiques of sort of what happened here, given that Filoni is lauded as like a Jedi master in terms of the narrative of Star Wars. But yeah, I do think there's some issues, but overall I liked it. So I just want it out there first. This is going to be positive coverage of the
so
finale.
this is a conversation we have a lot offline. It's like we love Star Wars, but we do have private aspirations of working for Lucasfilm someday. So we're trying to keep it like clean, but it's like we're just like you, and it's just media, and so we're constantly like trying to figure out where that line is. I mean, but where it's like we're being true to ourselves and true to our listeners, and and giving like solid content,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
not be saying something that may be problematic down the line. Oh shoot! But I don't think any of us ever are, especially not you, Grant. I think you always back up all of your ideas with a lot of thought and intention, and I really appreciate that. And I like pushing you because I just love your ideas. You got great notes. You know so much
yeah.
about film
And
that I don't.
so that out of the way, it's like this episode was sort of a downer out of all the episodes. It was sort of like so much happened, and you're gauging, where each character's at in their trajectories, their respective trajectories, and you're sort of it's coming up short in a couple different areas. And so yeah, this episode just didn't hit the way it could have hit, in my opinion. Like the finale really could have been a big special event, and I think we can talk about some points of maybe what didn't reach that expectation for us. But
Yeah,
uh, yeah, like, and I'm happy to dive right into that. But I thought some of the lore developments and some of the stuff with like the Night Sisters and just I thought that stuff was really cool. And then I thought there were a lot of interesting
yeah.
choices, a lot of cool choices. It's just really some of the character work that didn't fully, I guess, reach the apotheosis of what we thought could
Right.
happen. But again, this is the first season. So, what were your
Well,
thoughts on the finale, and then the season as a
well.
whole?
So I'm glad you phrased it that way. I for some reason with this series and this series alone, I wanted to see the full series in its completion from the beginning, from the first episode. It was just
Hmm.
sort of like, yeah, but, and I don't know why. I'm not like trying to rate these things. Like, you know me, I'm a Star Wars super fan.
Yeah,
I'm just happy to be here and happy to get more content because it's always great. And I do think Filoni does a phenomenal job. But I don't know. I think it was just sort of like I wanted to know what is this thing, like what is Ahsoka?
mm.
Even before we saw it, I'm like, what is this story that they're trying to tell here? What's the heart of it? So yesterday,
Well, I think there's a bunch of themes
yeah. Oh
we
yeah,
can
we'll
address,
talk
and
about them.
maybe addressing those themes will help us maybe understand what was
Yeah,
deflated or what felt like a letdown at the end of the show, which is I have major themes here. I've written down some. I mean, like heart versus mind, selfishness versus selfless are pretty
yep,
major
master
themes.
and
Then there's
apprentice,
the mutual dependency, trust
trusts.
theme with
Yeah,
Ahsoka. There's the art of war
yeah.
stuff with
So
Thrawn. Victory requiring, carefully deduced sacrifices, things like that. And then there's also like I call it like an add-on theme of like investigating the path of a Jedi or the role of a Jedi, which seems to be an ongoing
yes,
thing in almost everything that has Jedi character, anything that has a Jedi character in it. And I think for some of these themes, I almost think that they would have been better supported if there was more of an arc for the characters, right? Like so in my opinion, I think again, I've been accused before of being someone who wants like a little darker Star Wars, but it's Star Wars is also for a
yeah. It's
broad
got to be for
audience, and it
kids.
shouldn't just lean dark in any which way, just for the sake of being more gritty in any way or whatever. But I do think both Sabine and Ezra could have been darker, more frustrated characters. So when you have Ahsoka the light come back
Yeah.
inject herself back into the second part of the show. They can be inspired and actually reach that exact same point where they end at. Like she looked so
Yeah.
cool, such an inspiring force, yet and there's so much taken from Lord of the Rings, yet they don't take like the dawn of the like look to the east and the dawn of the fifth
Yes.
day moment for
Right.
her. Like she could have come back. Like that's the thing I would have lifted if
Yeah.
anything. Like because she looks like Gandalf. She could have she comes back. If you look at the camera work when she returns into the fold, it's very happenstance and it's
Mm.
not this sort of played up um introduction. Like she doesn't it's really not. It's kind of just she just jumps in a battle and she's back in the picture. And I think there could have been a lot more power to that moment. I think it could have shifted Ezra back to a getting back into the Jedi way.
Right.
It could
What's
have
his
pushed Sabine
journey?
in a new
Right.
direction
Yeah.
too. Yeah. So
Those are,
that's something that I thought could have worked better. If Ezra and Sabine were just a tad
yeah.
bit more emotional.
I think you
Yeah.
nailed it, man. I mean, and yes, like, I asked that question, like, what is this thing? And I can't, I watched the whole thing again, and in it, I was like, okay, all right. Cause it's like, you really have to, I think you really have to consume the series as a whole. And I know that's hard to do because it's like,
Yeah.
6-7 hours of programming or whatever. But it's like, then you can really feel there is like, okay, all right, there is Sabine does go through this thing. And you even have to dip back into Clone Wars a little bit. People were trying to figure
Mm.
out Sabine sort of like grasping the Force. And there's actually a line from Kanan Jarrus. And so, if you haven't watched Rebels, Sabine inherits the Darksaber from Mandalore, and pretty much she's convinced she needs to be able to wield it because people are going to be coming for her. So
Mm.
she trains with Kanan and Ezra, and Ezra's just sort of like, are you sure she can do this? She's like, can she be successful? She doesn't have the Force, and Kanan Jarrus says no. The Force resides in all living things. Sabine is blocked. She needs to be open to it. So that actually said, when you look at it from that frame, you sort of can be like, okay, so it's just some people just have to work harder at it to do it, but it's attainable. It's just,
Yeah.
that's just a lot for me to get into. It's just like, because you're opening this Pandora's box again, which is like Filoni's favorite thing. He'd probably call it like expanding the universe, and expanding
Right.
the galaxy, and the known, like, the qualities of the Force, and it is that. But
That's funny you say that because that's why none of the power creep stuff
yeah,
bothered me. Like when she force pushes Ezra onto the Star Destroyer, that didn't fully
yeah,
bother me as much as I've read and listened to and heard elsewhere. It's like that didn't really bother me at
you
all.
was
It
like,
was
yeah,
for
you
me. It
missed
was
the
like I
beats.
think, and
Yeah,
again, episode 4 and 5 are fantastic. I think 5 and 6 are fantastic. Love those episodes. The Thrawn reveal, all that stuff was just so
yeah,
good. So the series as a whole, I'm positive on, and this finale is just. We'll talk about some of the front just to get done with that. But for me, it's like that didn't bother me at all. It's more of that the character developments felt like sharp
yeah.
pivots rather than earned payoffs. It felt like next episode Ezra's building a saber after stating he doesn't use a saber,
Yeah.
and that's just like one example. Sabine and Ahsoka's relationship it's just never on the rocks. It's always they always come together and they always find a way to communicate and basically there's no real friction with them really like when
Well,
but
I
there
mean,
there's said to be a lot in the past and you almost want to see that flare up in the show but it
right,
doesn't so
right. I mean, well,
that's
it's
not
like the first 3 episodes. I mean, Ahsoka is cold as ice to Sabine. Like, she's really
right.
just like, you feel this sort of like, you know, that she doesn't trust Sabine at all. She's trying to stick to her guns on it. She does, of course, love her, but it's like she
Hmm.
made this bad decision. I think she knows it's a bad decision. Everyone sort of regrets it around her, Hera and Hu Yang, and everyone's just like, dude, like, why'd you? That was cold. Like, why did you just like give up on your Padawan? And she feels
Yeah.
like Ahsoka acts sort of like, you know, she's embarrassed, frankly, by that
Hmm.
decision. I think, but she's like, no, this is, and like you said, these themes that pop up, it's like, what is right, what is precedented, what is right, and what is right. Like that's a common thing back and forth where Hu Yang is sort of
Hmm.
this font of like, he kind of flips. It's kind of weird. He is like, well, this is the Jedi way. This is my programming. This is what Jedi do. And like everyone's bumping up against it, like being like, that's not great. But then it's Huyang who's sort of like, well, sometimes there's only one decision and you have to make it. And it may
Right,
feel like,
right.
it may
Yeah,
on paper be the wrong decision, but it's the decision you have. So it's not as simple as like
yeah.
following the will of the Force. It's just sort of, I mean, even though it is, but it is following the will of the Force, but it's sort of just like, yeah, trusting yourself to do what you have to do.
Right. And so, and what you're sort of alluding to is that Ahsoka does go on her own sort of inward journey in the show to change her teaching style and
Yeah.
her relationship to Sabine and sort of her perspective on Sabine.
Yeah. And
And but like
yeah.
you almost want to see their relationship almost like an episode. I almost wonder if there was an episode of like Sabine and Ezra, and then like Sabine and Ahsoka, like really getting to understand those
Yeah.
relationships and really digging into the learnings that they've had outside of each other. Right, Ahsoka's learnings come from Anakin and Hu Yang. It's like
Yeah.
that's great, but I almost want to see a little bit more in terms of them talking about the past, them Sabine's frustration, Sabine's endless struggle to, grip the grasp the Jedi teachings and the Jedi way. Because I mean, like, there's a lot of comps between Sabine and like Paul Atreides from Dune, where he just studies multiple disciplines, but there's so much kind of internal exploration of his learning, of his journey,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like I almost wanted that with Sabine. I was like, let's go full Atreides with Sabine, where she really is like, oh, this is I need to be a Mandalorian for this thing. I need to, oh, the Jedi say this about this. I should do
Yeah.
this, and like just something that's you almost want just more a treatment of her studies. If she is in fact training, which she says she is, but that's just her. That's just what she says. I mean, like you almost want to see
Yeah.
that throughout the show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's totally accurate, man. Everything you're saying, I think, is totally valid. I think, the choice, I think Filoni really tried to keep it high level and ambiguous. I mean, there's the
yeah,
practical element of like, well, you've only got 8 episodes to tell this story, and what is the story you're going to tell? And but he like really kept things like really ambiguous and high level, and it like where you have to really dig, and by dig I mean just think about it and just and have ideas, and it's sort of it's cool because you get multiple answers there. Like in order for Ahsoka to be the proper mentor for Sabine, she had to really process what she went through with Anakin and really just like come to terms with that, which I had always thought at this point she had done. Like, I think of her, we think of her as like Qui-Gon, right? Where she just follows the will of the Force. But this kind of takes, this series shows a different angle on that, where she's like,
yeah.
no, she was never really, she was just reacting. She's just been reacting since she left the Jedi Order and just being this like Ronin Jedi that like doesn't know her place in the galaxy and it's just doing a thing.
Love the Ronin call out in
Oh,
this
yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah, yeah. And you call and again, Ben, I think you called a lot of this. And I like last week you were just like,
Yeah.
or, you were like, I think a couple of them get
Yeah.
stuck there. And I was like,
Yeah. It was,
really? Because
yeah.
like, Purgles, I bet you could eventually just harness a Purgle and get back. But, yeah, it's fascinating that they're now stuck there, Sabine and
Yeah,
Ahsoka.
we didn't talk about
But
this exact like machination. I think we thought like Ahsoka would have to stay, or all of them would have to stay. But
I think you said Ronin in a New Galaxy last
yeah,
week, like
yeah.
verbatim. I think she might. I think you said she might stay to be a Ronin in a New Galaxy. And Thrawn's like, it might be fitting for you to be a Ronin in a New Galaxy. I was like, Ben is tapped in.
I'm
Ben
all the
is
way in,
tapped
buddy.
in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
But I was gonna say, yeah, I think what's great about Filoni is he offers that sort of like I mean, he's just like a smattering of like huge
yeah,
ideas, like what you're
yeah,
saying. So it's like it does feel like he's trying to create a lot of high concept, big ideas that sort of like turn into these massive hooks. And we can talk about how there was one hook that I think a lot of us were tracking that sort of didn't it didn't hook as well as it could have, and like the whole Balin skull
oh
journey,
god,
like
yeah,
that to me in a way like that's the kind of thing that maybe you play out a little more just to really get the audience hooked into that
yeah,
second season. But I mean, it does provide a hook in where he's standing and the location and what that means, but you almost want just a
Yeah.
tiny bit more just to get that audience on, on board.
I
But
definitely wanted
but
like a
he
I
also
wanted a finished season, like with a satisfying conclusion at the end and like an actual journey. And I
mm,
and this
yeah.
this wasn't that. It was like, I mean, it was,
I didn't even want to finish. I didn't want that arc to finish for Balin.
yeah.
I just think like you could have
Yeah,
hooked
hooked
me
me
in
hard,
in
hooked
a
you harder.
big way, given the elements that you're
That wait, those
exploring.
Mortis
You
statues
kind of
didn't do it for you?
it didn't go for that potential. Yeah, yeah, it's there.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
worry. Like there's definitely a hook there, and I have theories for what's going on there, and we'll get into
Mm.
that. But I just want to again talk positive about Filoni's just creative direction because I feel like he provides that like organic, unquestionable lore-driven angle. So like all the new lore that he's created, it's it's in the same school of thought as George, and so it's like it feels like just of the galaxy far, far away. It feels of Star Wars, and so it's unquestionable. It's like it's
Yeah.
great lore and it's all additive, and you're not like, oh, this is self-reflexive. This is commentary on previous lore. This
Yeah.
is some sort of some sort of contortion or inversion of previous lore. It's like it's nice that there's just additive lore in
Yeah.
Star
Oh,
Wars.
absolutely.
But
Yeah, Filoni to
yeah,
a
and
fault.
then
Like they've given him the license, and he always takes it. He's like, I will build this galaxy further and further. With every swing, it'll do something else. The other thing that I'm
yeah,
curious to ask you about is we know from various documentaries that when Filoni went into this, he had like a little Kurosawa action figure, on his
yeah.
desk, and he was really trying to channel Kurosawa. Do you think that contributed to this style that Filoni used to create this series?
It's funny you say that because I was just about to talk about style and visual style specifically. But no, I think Ahsoka, I think is definitely a traveling Ronin,
Yeah,
sword fighter. I don't think that it's. I mean, it's clearly a Kurosawa character at this point.
but even as
Um,
how they
but
deliver
with all
themes
this,
and how they, the master and apprentice and did that feel like, even like another layer down? Was it Kurosawa esque?
um, well, I think. Well, it's fascinating because I don't think the Jedi are entirely samurai anymore, and I think I've talked about this with you guys all
Yeah,
the time in text, but I wouldn't. I'm kind of seeing as the canon moves on in the timeline, I'm seeing Jedi move from samurai warriors to kind of like roadside Zen
yeah,
masters. That's what I'm kind of seeing, and it's for me it's a little deflating given that like I don't know if we need to scrutinize the Jedi so heavily, given that this is a faraway
yeah,
galaxy with impossible weaponry, and it's got so much flair and kick for set piece moments that why is the rise of the pacifist Jedi of such importance? And will Rey's new Jedi Order forego lightsabers? Like, given what I'm hearing in all of the stories that are moving forward in the timeline, it's maybe no lightsabers in the future. Maybe that's something. You know what I mean? Like, especially with Ahsoka's line in this finale where she's like, being a
it's
Jedi,
mine.
it's not about wielding a
Right.
lightsaber. I was like, right,
But
okay,
except it
like
is
yeah,
for
but
me,
like
kind of.
this is a fictional
Yeah.
galaxy, but
Yeah.
okay,
I've
yeah, I
got
get it.
4 lightsabers behind me. I'm like, it kind of is
Okay,
about lightsabers, right?
yeah. Well, I'm just like it's kind of cool. I don't
Yeah.
know, like
I think it's going to
yeah,
be an ebb and flow, man. I mean, that's sort of the way it goes. I'm not that worried about
sure.
that, them, becoming too, like, boringly passive. Excuse me. But because, I mean, this series had a,
I like that boringly passive.
what's that?
I'm
Yeah.
taking that.
I don't know. That didn't sound really like proper English, but here we are.
No, 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 works, works.
But they, to
I like
me, because how many like lightsaber battles were there in this series? I mean, there was like a million,
so many,
and they
so
were all
great.
exactly
Yeah,
what I know you love, which is like one on one, like focused, talking, ideology while they're
well,
like
that's
slashing
interesting
at each
because
other. Like that's
yeah,
the stuff, and so it's just like, well, yes, they're talking about this passivity, but they're also sort of validating the fact that they need to be able to protect themselves to live.
right. And
Yeah,
back to just the visual style before we went on the tangent. I really do love a lot of the lightsaber fights in
yeah,
this, but at the same time, when you said that, are you seeing any stylistic comparisons to Kurosawa? Definitely in terms of like aesthetics and costume
yeah.
design and character demeanor and character attitude, definitely, and just sort of some of the archetypes he's exploring. But I feel like Filoni's locked into that Lucasian sort of like
Yeah.
style of storytelling and Star Wars storytelling specifically. And I wonder if that hurts when we're in a time where we've had The Last Jedi and we've had Andor and we've had all these really modernistic sort of takes on Star Wars
Yeah.
storytelling, where it's almost like it's the visual language of The Last Jedi and paired with Filoni's sort of lore-driven approach to Star Wars is sort of that's what I
Yeah.
dream about from the franchise. I think Filoni is just a little classical and it can feel a little dated sometimes, given that we've had these other works that are just utterly
Yeah.
gorgeous and really really well thought out sort of visuals that go outside just sort of classical set piece entrances and exits.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that's. Thank you. That's exactly what I was wondering, and you elucidated perfectly. But
But the classical entrances and exits very similar to Kurosawa.
yeah,
There is a
yeah,
Kurosawa-ness to that too, though. And I know George, that was a huge influence. He was a huge influence for George
yeah.
too. So
I,
obviously that's sort of the Star Wars style in a
right.
lot
We
of
don't
ways.
have George anymore, so it's like why? I mean, I think so. It makes sense, and I don't know if it's Filoni's choice, if it's Kathleen's choice, if it's a choice at all, but it makes sense. Like someone should be beating that drum. Someone should be
Well, when
keeping this
Ahsoka
as the
returns again,
bedrock.
I keep going back to Ahsoka's return. I'm like, this could be a visual, like a big
Yeah.
visual moment, like her boots landing. Like there could
Are
be
you talking about when
real
she like lands on
gravitas.
Peridia, or
Yeah, no, when she lands, just when Ezra and Sabine are kind of fighting off
yes, yes,
the
and Sabine
um, bandits, and she just jumps into
into the
the
fray.
action, and I'm just like, this could be a big moment
They
here.
had the
Like
hill right
visually,
there.
could
They
be
had the
like,
hill right there.
look at the
Yeah,
Last Jedi, and like look at some of those reveals, big moments in the set
yeah,
piece moments and things like that. It's like these are big and they're visually well thought out, like extremely
yeah,
well thought out, and like Stevie Edlund's cinematography is just out of control in
yeah.
that
It's
movie.
just like a wide shot, and you just see her like running down a hill. It,
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. That's what I'm
yeah,
talking about. But
yeah. I mean,
uh,
that beat still hit me. I was still like, oh yeah, we got another like
okay,
Jedi on in the fray, and like here she comes, and
yeah,
that one of the magical parts of Star Wars is the silhouettes, where everyone has a very unique silhouette, and it's like it could only have
yeah,
been Ahsoka running down that hill into the action.
right.
So I mean, it was a choice, but I get, yeah, I get what you're saying, that could have been a powerful beat, and yeah,
And so I just feel like love that Filoni's an additive storyteller where I don't question anything he adds because it feels so steeped in the
yeah,
mythology and so um, reverent to what has come before. But yeah, well, the final I think gripe I had about this finale was Thrawn. I feel like this is my last little
yeah,
nitpick on the finale. Is Thrawn is like, before we really talk about what we loved, because there's so much
yeah,
to love, and I really want to talk about some of the mysteries that are presented. But Thrawn doesn't seem like the master tactician that his literary
yeah.
kind of
His counterpart.
version is, and how I think, and what's surprising to me is like Thrawn's the type of character where people shouldn't even get close to whatever he's trying to achieve. Like he's almost the character you use like parallel action, like Silence of the
Yeah,
Lambs level. Like they think they're getting close,
yeah.
but they're nowhere near.
You
Like
don't
I
see the
almost,
walls
it's almost
closing
would
in
have been more
around you,
interesting.
right? You don't even know they're there until you're in a box,
Right.
and you're
You
like,
don't even
oh,
know he's halfway across the planet somewhere else and he's
yeah,
leaving. You know what I mean? Like by the time they actually get to, they're going to open this last blast door after fighting Morgan and they go through. Thrawn's the type of character that like is somewhere else on the planet
yeah,
and is like, oh, you thought I was there, but I'm not, and I'm leaving by. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like it's almost too close. And for him to put like two stormtroopers in that docking bay, well, like at the
Oh, the
very
Death
end there, I was
Troopers.
like, what? Like
Yeah,
I guess there was the night troopers,
he
but
was
it's
being economical.
I would have put like an entire
Yeah, but
regiment in
he
that
needs all these
docking.
fighters, right, for his next campaign in the galaxy. So he's being very economical, and that was a common theme throughout the
That's
story.
a good defense. I like that. That
Yeah,
helps.
yeah. I think so. The thing with Thrawn, and what is lore accurate, like with the Zon Thrawn, is that Thrawn is a master tactician and can do all those things to everyone that doesn't have the Force. But like
Yeah.
Force sensitives, he just can't. He can't account for it. He can't quantify it. He can't be tactic around it. And what they tried to say is that in this case, he did a better job and ultimately was victorious because he knew Anakin Skywalker and his methods. He was able to, I guess, put enough roadblocks in between, and stay on, like, just on Ahsoka, to prevent her from stopping him. Now, he thinks he got a clean getaway, but to me, I mean, he didn't know that Ezra was on that ship and was able to come back with him. So he thinks no one knows he's there, and and everything's going to be fine. But Ezra knows everything and can rally the troops. So I think that's the point. Is that, like, Ezra, Thrawn is, like, tactically perfect until he runs into the Force, and then that's where he knows he gets tripped up.
That's a really good defense of sort of some of my critique of his tactics, because it seems like this is the one thing you almost cannot plan for, and just throw as few resources as possible at those situations, just like you're saying, to create a roadblock to put stoppage on the clock.
Yeah, and he didn't want to have to do it. It was only, like, as necessary. He was like, although I feel like he probably could have gotten off that planet a little faster if he wanted to. They were loaded in the episode 7, but it was like, all right, well, I'll sacrifice some ground troops, and then, like, the ground troops got mowed through because they had 3 Jedi, like, coming through them, which was powerful. And then he's like, okay, he sacrificed Morgan Elsbeth, and that, I think, is going to bite him in the butt at some point.
Right, because he says, for the Empire, the security of our galaxy, and then she's like, for Dathomir. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, the Great Mothers and Thrawn may not be tied so closely.
Once that, because that deal's over now. Like, you could see he took them to the witches to Dathomir, and we'll talk about what's in the crates. But I think that deal's over now, and I can't imagine those 3 Great Mothers were, or great. I don't know what their title is when you're like,
they're Great Mothers.
Like, what they what they how they feel once that's done, and how about sacrificing Morgan Elsbeth. I mean, they essentially made her a demigod, and then he just, like, used her, like, just.
I know, they gave her a Chris knife and everything. They were like, here's a maker. that blade was cool. The sword of Telzin, or blade of Telzin, really cool.
Oh yeah, we probably saw that in Clone Wars at some point.
Oh, maybe it was maybe.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of odd. They just, like, and they're like, and now we fabricate you a sword. Have some. It's very much parallels the Jedi, and from that that legend stuff you sent me earlier, it's like the early witches of Dathomir were banished Jedi. So,
I think legends, right?
But
we'll see what happens. So let's talk about what we liked about this finale and just the series as a whole. Obviously, we talked about Filoni's lore, and everything he creates is really, really special, and hopefully will operate in future stories. But Baylan Skull, like, the coolest character on screen in, like, years, basically. Like, one of the most fascinating and complex and just rad characters to ever, in Shin, obviously.
It's so heartbreaking, and you got to think he's going to be recast. Some people are saying Liev Schreiber would be a good thing. It's like, poor Ray Stevenson's not even cold yet on the ground, which is so, I hate even talking about it. But I mean, it was like such a masterful. I wanted to watch that character forever. Like, he was so good in that role, and the character was so good. It was great. And Shin Hati too was like, it was a new take on The Apprentice, and where I think she's gonna play a major role in the next season if we get the next season. Which I guess, for the sake of being,
we're definitely. There's no way we're not.
It feels like Filoni was like, the only way I'm doing this is if I can get multiple seasons and can write to that, because I mean, he definitely you could sort of tie in these hanging things later, but it would be such a criminal thing if you didn't get the, like, full story on the on the big screen, or on a series.
Well, I think it's probably going to go full Lord of the Rings that second season too, where it's really dealing with some ancient sources of power, things like that. But that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like.
I didn't even take that metaphor like that far, but you're right. We could get the 2 towers and sort of realize the full depth of the corruption of the Force. And
sure. Also, Balin's skull is looking out at a giant mountain that's kind of gleaming red at the top or gleaming orange at
Ye-
the top.
yes,
Did you
I
see that?
did, and
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to talk about other things we loved?
um, I mean, this is what I love. There'll be plenty of time to talk
Yeah.
about that. Well, I wanted to say so. Easter eggs have started popping out, and there's two, and one will address what you're
Yeah.
talking about. One is that there is a LED wrist thing that Balin Skull has on his
Yes.
right
Yes.
wrist, and it's
Yeah.
names in Arabish, and the names are Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, C-3PO, R2D2, and Ben. Like in a little list on his like
Yeah.
wrist, and it's like, is that just a little like, oh, congratulations, you deciphered Arabish, or is it a reverence list? Is it like, if I see these people, I need, he's a mercenary. Is he supposed to kill those people?
Sure.
Are those the top, at targets for him to destroy?
What if it's just the art department asking Dave
Yeah,
Filoni where they should put Orabesh on his armor and what it should say, and he should say like have it be like the most pivotal
yeah.
characters to the Star Wars canon, and so fans go
I think,
crazy,
yeah.
and then laughs and walks away.
I think there's probably a
Um,
more than 50% chance that's the case, but it could be
okay.
more. And it's like, and I mean, or it's a sign that they're coming, for that.
Or he's a time traveling hitman or something, and it's like
Well,
I just can't
they're
see
all
that being the
alive at
story.
this point and flourishing, all those characters. So,
Oh, so they're active. Like he just want. Well, why did he leave the galaxy if that's his mission? That
well,
seems
because what comes next. So the so he's on the finger, right? That, like, I forget what,
right of
of
the
the
father.
father,
Yeah.
and it's pointing. And if you look in the distance, there is this yellow flame above a mountain in the distance, exactly where that statue is pointing. And
Yeah, and for people who didn't watch Clone Wars, the Mortis beings are basically these godlike characters in the galaxy, in the universe, and they are basically like each an embodiment of the Force. The Father sort of represents the arcane, sort of like Force
and
itself, and the daughter represents the light side of the Force and selflessness, and the son represents the dark side of the Force and
yes, and the
selfishness.
father sort of
And
maintains balance between those two.
right, the
Now,
father is almost like
yeah.
this balanced
So
figure.
there was a Mortis arc and we don't have to go through this whole thing, but
Yeah,
I
you don't have to.
explained this to my
Just those who
wife,
know.
like, at the end of that episode, and I was just like, well, actually, blah, 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 and, like, the full Charlie Day, like, and then this happened and this happened. So I'll just say there was an arc. It was Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka that mysteriously, like, vanished and ended up on this land of Mortis, which every day is a calendar year, and then ultimately things go side, it was there to have Anakin be the father. Like, the father wanted to step down.
Right, right.
Give,
That was what the Mortis deities wanted. They wanted Anakin to stay on Mortis and become this
yeah,
new figure of balance because he's the
yeah,
chosen one, take the father's place. What happens is there's the brother just goes crazy and basically lets loose all this rage and basically attacks everyone
kills the daughter.
and corrupts Ahsoka. And then Ahsoka dies, and then
Oh,
the sister uses her last breath to save Ahsoka, and basically there's like almost like an essence transfer of the sister into
wait,
Ahsoka, and now the sister's sort of like convoy,
the
like this
convor,
bird that would
yeah,
follow
it
around the
looks like a
sister,
barn owl. That was that
is
white barn owl.
is
Yeah,
basically now following around Ahsoka, making me think that the sister is still tied to Ahsoka in a
yeah, the
major
daughter.
way.
Yeah,
The essence of the sister likely still being inside
yeah,
Ahsoka in some
but
interesting way,
ultimately, yeah,
which begs the
yeah.
question, sort of, will we see a brother esque situation with Balin at
That's
some
what,
point?
so I'm wondering. So ultimately, at the end of the Mortis arc, they all die. The father, the son, and the daughter all
Right.
die. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's an empty world at this point. And so that someone pointed out. So that flame that was above that temple in the distance on Mortis,
Yes.
that's exactly the flame that was above the father's temple on Mortis.
That's
So it's
very
like,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, because there's a couple locations we see on Mortis that create a lot of sort of questions in my mind. One of which is that there's a sword on Mortis that is basically like in this circle, on this altar that is wreathed in green
oh
fire.
yes,
Green fire we saw a lot of in this episode with the Witches of Dathomir. I'm wondering if the witches of Dathomir and that green fire is connected to that sword. And, obviously we saw the sword of Telzin here, but it was a different sword.
Oh
But
God,
I'm
yeah.
wondering if that green fire is connected to them in some way, and if the sister is connected to the Dathomiri in some way, just given the color coding.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean,
But
it very
yeah,
so the whole plot point with that sword on Mortis was that it was the only thing that could kill, or that could
the brother.
control or kill the brother and like
Yeah.
and all them. So I'm wondering if the sword of Talzin is the same sword. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I don't know.
Mm,
I think that could be.
like a canonized, or I guess it's still
Yeah,
canon. It was Clone Wars
a
canon, but
live
this is I
action.
don't know, more live action,
Because what
his
happened
version
to
of it.
that
That's
sword? It
interesting.
must just be buried under all
Uh,
the rubble of that fortress, right?
right. Yeah, so it looks like a mountain in the distance that Balin's looking at, but it could very well be a temple, like you're saying, with the sort of fire at the top or the
But it
gem at the
looks like
top
the
or whatever
Mortis
it is.
Temple. You know.
Okay, that's interesting because to me, there's another location on Mortis that I thought that is that Balin's searching for, which is the fount of the dark side, or the well
Yeah.
of the dark side
Well, of the
is in
dark
on
side. Yeah.
Mortis too, and
Yeah.
that's orange. Like that is
Yeah.
this burning fiery kind of location, and that's kind of what it looks like in the distance there with Balin. Could that be the well of the dark side, the well of the power of the dark side?
Yeah.
He's searching for power, and then to me, I'm thinking Filoni is trying to get towards this arc where it's like Balin represents the brother and Ahsoka represents the sister, and then you're telling me Balin won't be able to see Anakin's ghost if he appears, between them while they're fighting? Like, I bet
Yeah.
he'll be able to see that ghost too. And basically,
Yeah.
Anakin can then act as the father and sort of pay tribute to what was always the planned intention of the Mortis gods, which was for Anakin to act as the father at some point or be the father. So
Yes.
that's
I
it's kind of what I
agree.
think it is, but
I think, and yeah, to that end, I first of all, I agree with the ending, and that's sort of what I thought too, because obviously we had Anakin show up in awesome blue light form
yeah,
at
Ben,
the
another
end.
another really that's giving you more points too, because you were like that Force vision, like that was definitely Anakin, right? I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh man, I think it was the Force, but now it seems like Anakin really is a vested interest in Ahsoka, and he's there. He's very much there.
Yeah. Yeah. Rosario had my back on that. The next day, he's like, "Bro, I'm with you. That was definitely Anakin."
You sent us that cut out. Oh man,
Yeah. Which is so funny. But yeah. I think I based on what Balin had said in like episode 6 and 7, where he's like, no, I'm gonna change the wheel. I'm gonna do all that.
yeah.
I think he wants to be the father. I think because
Hmm.
we know that like he wants to become a Mortis god and probably the father, because like they control the balance of the Force in the galaxy. And I mean, maybe he does want to tip it one way or the other to like, because we know he wants to break the cycle, right?
Hmm.
And only like that is the peak of the Force Mountain, right? Is becoming a Mortis god. So
Yes.
that's what I think he wants to
That's
do.
great too, because that could lead to a really fun visual of like his eyes going black and like the blue pupil and like that, that
Yeah,
sort of stuff. That the
yeah,
father looks crazy. Like the father looks awesome, and he has that
yeah,
interesting cowl. Maybe that's a part of becoming the father. I don't know, but no, that could be cool because that is the ultimate power. When you're talking about ultimate power, it's
yeah.
the father really, because it seems like he's the sort of strongest one of the three.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, so you've got a trinity of women there, right? You've got Shin Hati, you've got Sabine, and
Yeah.
you've got Ahsoka.
Yes.
But then you've got the two men, right? You've got Anakin, which I'm considering as a character now, and then Balin Skull as well. So I'm wondering sort of how that shakes out. But I could see a way where like Ahsoka, Anakin, and Balin sort of assume the roles of the Mortis gods again.
Right.
And
That's sort of what I was theorizing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and when we think about in Rise of Skywalker, we hear the voices.
Mm.
Rey hears the voices, and Anakin says, "Bring balance to the Force like I did." And so it's like
Okay.
that could mean like, well, he temporarily balanced the Force when he chucked the Emperor down the well, or it could mean something more, like maybe he actually became the father and brought balance to the Force literally.
Mm.
And and then we hear Ahsoka's voice as well. Maybe this is all coming from Peridia.
Oh, that's yeah, that's wild. Okay, I mean, I'm interested. I hope Ahsoka. and Sabine get back in the second season somehow. But that is interesting.
Ahsoka
I would
needs a grand exit, like her maybe, getting on the boat and, sailing off to Illuminor is her ending.
right. That's interesting because yeah, for a film like The Last Jedi to for that title to be as affecting as it is and as powerful as it is, I think all the Jedi need to be cleared off the map,
Yeah.
before the time of the First Order, because it really feels more powerful if Luke truly
The
is the
last.
very last Jedi.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
and then Ray,
yeah.
obviously Ray is,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean.
I do. But I think Jedi is a doctrine. It's just sort of, that's another thing this series showed us, which I really like, is sort of
Yeah,
like Ahsoka is not a Jedi, right? The closest thing to a Jedi they have is Hu Yang because he knows the doctrine, but she
right,
doesn't. She's like, no, I left the Order. I'm no longer a Jedi. I had a great master, but
right.
I'm not. But I don't consign myself to that doctrine anymore. Which is very Qui-Gon of her, and Balin and Shin don't identify as Jedi either, and
Right.
neither does. Yeah, I guess probably Ezra does. That's kind of a cool part for him.
Right, where he says, Kanan was my master,
Yeah,
or I learned to build it from my master. It's like he really did take his tutelage as official Jedi training,
yeah,
so he really does, I think, buy into the whole thing.
yeah. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, now, so you've got to resolve, like, do Ezra and Luke meet? Like, they're both Jedi and they're both out there. Does Ezra have to fully sacrifice himself at some point, to really clear the deck for Luke to be the last Jedi? Like, does he?
Well, maybe Ezra isn't a Jedi anymore, is what I'm thinking. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Maybe because of all his 10 years with the No T
Oh,
and sort of
right.
being labeled a Boken
Boken.
Jedi by
Yeah.
Balin. It's like
Yeah.
he actually being called a Boken Jedi actually allows him not to be the
The,
last Jedi
yeah.
in any way.
Yeah.
So it's like, or to take up space in that
Yeah.
label. But it's like, I don't know. I hope he doesn't have to die. I hope he's still in the galaxy or something. Like that would be fun. I think you could. There's and I
Yeah.
loved the lightsaber fighting with Ezra. I thought Ezra was
Yeah.
captivating in this episode. He was just like gliding across the floor, like
Yeah.
cutting stormtroopers in half, cuts a death trooper's head off, and like there's a Hitchcockian sort of like
Yeah.
hide the violence, like the head rolls off,
Yeah.
in the background, background at some point. I was like loved the Ezra stuff.
Yeah.
That was so
No.
good. So I just
Yeah. That.
want more Ezra.
Fondi, I think is his last name, or he's a fantastic
So
actor.
good.
He's exactly like,
Oh,
and
so much charisma.
great directing too, because he just
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's exactly what I would imagine Ezra Bridger would grow up to be, and he still has that like sense of joy about him, and it's just like this youthfulness, and it's just like he's very much a Jedi. Like he's actually a really well formed. Like he grew up, and and he's not bitter and all those things, and it's just kind
Yeah,
of, I don't know.
it's interesting though, because having watched Rebels, there is a darkness inside
Yeah, but
Ezra
he
that we
resolves
all
it.
know about as
Yeah.
fans. He does
Or
resolve
Obi-Wan
it,
Kenobi
and I
resolves
think
it
maybe
for
all
him.
maybe the stint with Darth Maul helped him
Yeah.
resolve
He
that.
was like,
But
you know what? That's not good.
it's
I'm not
like
going to do that.
there is a well of darkness there. I wonder if it does feel pretty resolved in Rebels, but because he's much more of a commander at the end of Rebels. He
Yeah.
feels like he's really leading the team at the end.
When his master dies, he has his own, it's not really apotheosis, but he becomes a full knight, I think, and understands what it means to be a Jedi, and and all the things everyone around him sacrificed, and he realized, like, no, this family, these people, this is what's most important to me. And I mean, he learned that from Obi-Wan Kenobi, and
Yeah.
and he had a rough go around with Maul. So I think he's kind of open and shut that, and now we're just seeing like fully actualized.
That's
Ezra.
good. Yeah.
Also, so I mean, as far as favorite parts go, I mean, Hu
Yeah,
Yang's
let's do it.
workshop with
Oh
like
yeah, I knew
Ezra
your favorite.
rating.
Oh, and you love the lightsaber
Oh
construction
yeah,
scene.
I mean, don't love how they're just sort of glossing over, like, oh yeah, there's kyber crystals everywhere. Don't worry. Like, I would show me the drawer
okay,
with.
yeah. I wanted to talk about that. Like, is that just Hu Yang just has a
Yeah,
few like
yeah.
extras?
I think that is, but
Love
it's
it.
like, show me a drawer with like 100 like like kyber crystals, or like maybe they're all like in this really cool,
Yeah, so,
like nesting egg
yeah.
situation, and it's like, and he pulls one out.
That's where the whole character development feels like sharp pivots versus earned payoffs because you almost want him to open a
Yeah,
drawer, like look at the kyber crystals, and then like he's like, "Which one calls to you?" or something, and maybe you hear like Kanan's voice from one
yeah.
of them or something, and it's like, bang,
Or
like
yeah, a new Jedi we've
something
never heard of
for a
before.
hot
Be like, oh
second.
yes, he was a very wise Jedi, and went through this, and this, and like we got a little like they're toying with how old Hu Yang is, and I don't think they kind of say it in earlier on. He's like, I've trained every Jedi, and like people just gloss over that, like what, like no one stops and is like, what do you mean every Jedi? and and he's
Yeah,
like, no, I mean every Jedi. like I'm and like we do get the line from Ezra where he's like, how old are you? And he's like, old enough to know that blah blah blah. But it's like, no, like he's, they're just flirting and being coy with the fact that he's 25,000 years old. Um,
yeah. Well, he does bring the Jedi to find their kyber crystals. That's like his whole
yeah,
thing, right? So like any Jedi that's gone through that rite of passage has met
yeah,
Hu Yang, and so
and he helps.
it's weird that he says train
Well,
them because I
he
guess the lightsaber combat training
yeah.
he does know all the forms. He's kind of like the
I'm being
officiator
loose with
on all the
that term.
forms.
I mean, I think he says I helped every Jedi construct their
Oh, okay,
lightsaber,
okay, okay.
which he did. Um, which is just
Yeah,
fascinating.
that
Yeah,
scene
no,
was
and then he's
awesome.
like, I had two of these, and like, and then one was Kanan's emitter, and it actually, like, that emitter is my favorite emitter in the like
It's like
series.
it's like yeah, the wakizashi. It's like
Yeah,
an actual like like a samurai
yeah.
sword. It
I've
looks
just
so
been
cool.
following, and like after playing Survivor, you can construct sort of a version of Kanan's lightsaber, and it's a pretty classic design where it actually has color on it. It's like green, which a lot of them
So
are just like
cool.
silver and black, and it's just like it's a really cool design. And so his is like a little Obi-Wan and a little Kanan. It's a cool design. I can't wait to see.
It is cool.
I just went to Kentucky this past week, and I want to talk to you and Adam about it. But I met this guy that has access. First of
Yeah.
all, the school was amazing, but he has access to all these 3D printers and stuff, and he makes
Okay.
like with resin. He like 3D prints all, like pretty much every
Oh,
lightsaber.
very cool.
He's making Balin and Shinhatis now, and I'm like, you got another, like, in the
Can I get a Porter Angle
oh
over here?
yeah, yeah.
Can I
So,
get
anyways,
the
I kind of want to bring him on the
blade of
show
Verdana?
and talk to him. Yeah,
Oh, cool. Yeah, that'd be
and
great.
just because,
Oh, we talk about lightsabers. We could
yeah,
talk. I mean, we spend like 30 minutes talking about lightsabers every episode. Might as well have an actual person who
I
prints
just
them
sort
out
of
and
adore it. Yeah,
constructs them
exactly, and like how you
IRL.
get into that. So I might do that. But yeah, he's got another one, and I can't,
Yeah.
and yeah, obviously there's a lot of makers that make these, so I'm looking forward to Ezra's one. But Ezra's new one. But I loved I loved how much he
I
honored.
almost pulled the trigger on Sabine's lightsaber the other day. I saw it
Mm-hmm.
online, and I was like, I like that
Oh,
lightsaber
it's
quite a
beautiful.
bit. And I actually think Sabine is one of the coolest characters to be on screen in a while as well. I would say like, Balin, Shin, Sabine. I love Ahsoka. I almost wish the character, you almost wish there was more Ahsoka in Ahsoka to like
Yeah,
really get some more from her from the
yeah,
series. And she's extremely zen in the series, so it's like I want to just I would just wish that there was a little bit more complexity to the character. Whereas I think like Sabine is an incredibly complex character, very, very
yeah,
kind of furious in battle, um, and just all around cool. And I love her lightsaber. I love the blasters. I love when Ahsoka's like, use your blasters during the fight with the night
yeah,
troopers, and she like whips out the blasters and like just takes out a bunch of them. And like, I kind of love moving between blasters and lightsabers. And then she dual wields with it, like she goes between wielding a lightsaber and then dual wielding blasters. Like I've never
yeah.
seen that
And using the force, like
ever.
she force throws like three
Yes,
troopers
yeah.
at one point. Yeah, pretty
I
cool.
and bet yeah, and I do love Ahsoka in this episode, and I do love that moment where Ezra like pulls two night troopers and Ahsoka just cuts them in half, and the
Yeah.
camera just dollies in, like pushes in, and I'm just like, this is the best shot. That might be the Utini shot for me,
Okay.
honestly. Either that or Thrawn with the ties, but yeah, I Ahsoka is incredibly cool. I just can't wait for season 2 because I want to see what's going on with Balin and how she's evolved. Like that's almost the part of the story that you're wanting to
Yeah.
see, and you felt like was just briefly teased when she lands on the planet and just fights him quickly. You almost want that their battle of the wits, their ideologies are so interesting that I feel
Yeah.
like if we just got to if Ahsoka then sort of gets to really lay into him about, what it means to be an honorable warrior,
Yeah,
something, like at some point. That would be really great.
that was yeah, and because their ideologies aren't that far off. Like they're a lot more the same than
No.
they are different. But he does have
Yeah.
this. I mean, he's a fanatic, really. But we just don't know what
Great.
he's a fanatic about. He just kind of
Right.
like
Yes.
he admires the
You almost wish you had
Jedi,
a
but
little bit more breadcrumbs in terms of what is he chasing,
yeah,
and is he selfish in this endeavor? Is this a selfish endeavor that he's chasing this power and he
yeah,
wants this power? Is he going to use it for selfish reasons, or is he using it for the betterment of the galaxy? Is he like, is there a Thanos reasoning?
right,
Like, what is his reasoning? Like, it's just kind of interesting to think about. Yet we don't really know. But yeah, again, I love Sabine. I love Ezra. I love all that stuff. The blocking, the action blocking,
yeah.
it was great. Little camp, like a tad bit camp this episode, like just the zombie troopers just felt like a little,
I thought it was
I don't
great.
know.
It was great.
It was cool. It was just like it was a lot at once, but it was
Yeah,
cool.
we could talk about that because it's like, how zombie are these troopers? How many of those are zombie troopers? Are they all zombies? Can they still use comms when there's like just animated corpses? Because I mean, we've seen with precedent of raising the dead. I mean, this is the coolest thing that the Dathomirians do. They can raise the dead.
Yeah.
They're usually just sort of like mindless warriors, but maybe these are a little more mindful. And you
Sure.
know, and oh gosh, we have so we're at like 56 minutes, and I'm like, we haven't talked about the like what's
No,
in the
it's fine.
box.
I don't even think it's camp really. I
Yeah,
think I think it's meant to be genre in that
yeah,
moment.
yeah,
It's meant to
yeah,
be a zombie
yeah,
movie in that moment. It's totally fine. I'm just saying, like, it's an interesting blending of tones where you're really talking like the blending of tones in this series has been wild. We've gotten some of the most interesting sort of introspections about the Jedi.
yeah,
We've gotten some really fun comedic beats with Hu Yang and Sabine, and then we've gotten some like just genre moments like these zombie troopers and things like that. There's like a real and then real sort of tactical war film stuff with Thrawn and sort of like strategic
yeah,
planning, things like that. Just a really cool blend of themes. I think it's just a lot of themes going
yeah,
on, and so it's just
yeah.
it's or a lot of tones going on. So it's just that was just interesting. But is there an army of the dead now? Is that what the caskets are? Does Thrawn now have an army of the
Well,
dead to wield in the known
so at
galaxy?
first I thought that like those whatever those caskets were for Thrawn, but I'm not so sure anymore because
Hmm.
I think they might be for the Dathomirian Night Sisters. Like I think they might be dead witches, and maybe Thrawn will be able to use them, and maybe not. But I seem like because his first stop is Dathomir, I wonder if that was like, his payment was the Night Sisters were going to get him home, but like his
Hmm.
payment to them is like, well, if we can take my full, Star Destroyer, I can carry all your, people back with you, because he
Hmm.
says a line early on in the series where he's like, or they're like that, thank you for waking us up or something, where he actually animated those Night Sisters, those great mothers.
Hmm.
And
Right.
also I
Right.
noticed, in the first and I couldn't find the name of the planet, but the first tomb raiding that Ahsoka does in the first episode, she
Yeah. Yeah.
looks
Yeah.
around the walls and she's like doing all that, like, Indiana Jones stuff.
Yes.
Those three Night Sisters on the wall are the great mothers that we see there. Like they're ancient, because they even
Okay.
have the little orbs in their hand.
That's right. Those little
So it's
orbs.
like, yeah, so they're ancient people. So I think they, have their own, that's going to be part of the next series, I think, is whatever their motives are as well. So I'm not sure
Yeah.
if those caskets, I think my bet is dead witches. I think those are witches that are going to be reanimated and they will repopulate, or maybe they're all great mothers and they will repopulate Dathomir.
That's fascinating. Yeah. They could be witches. They could be just Dathomiri warriors,
Yep.
like that
Maul.
look similar to Maul or something
Yep.
like that. Like that could be great. So it's like really bringing a lot of cool Dathomiri characters back in and have like sort of an army for the witches to wield, maybe not Thrawn to wield.
Yeah.
That would be cool. Yeah. I mean, it seems like Dathomir is going to be a big part of this next part of the story with in the Mandoverse, which is
Yeah.
very cool.
Yes.
Like that is very cool because I think we needed something else besides the New Republic. It's like we kind of were hanging our hat in a lot of New Republic
Yeah.
moments in Mandalorian. Let's let's have more, remnant Imperial stuff, and then let's bring in some, Witches of Dathomir. Like that's another
Yeah.
fun, antagonist for the series, for this universe or this part of the timeline. But yeah, I thought that was cool. The sort of them raising the dead, that moment was so
Yeah.
eerie. The music I think changes there. That was cool. What else?
Well, there,
Yeah,
there's
I'm interested to see what the Great Mothers do
yeah.
now that when they get back to the galaxy. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, okay, now you've done Mandalorians again, and you've done Dathomirian witches again. It's like I think we need to start investigating new races of of aliens, and sort of we need to create something new that's cool as well. It's it'll be hard, but it's not impossible. But I'd like to see some new stuff. New creatures
I
and
do
new
think it's incredibly
schisms.
genius to use the Dathomiri witches as the sort of mystical
Yeah,
energy from beyond the known galaxy because there's lots of moments. I think there's even like Palpatine has always sensed something,
yeah,
outside their galaxy, and it's like it makes sense that if it's like
yeah.
these great mothers and this thread of
No,
fate, like that makes
yeah.
that makes a lot of
This is
sense. Like
perfect.
the world
Yeah,
building's smart,
it is smart world building. It's super fun. I'm just ready for something else. Like it could have been Zepho or whatever, but
interesting.
it wouldn't have hit as hard as Death and as Night Sisters.
Yes,
But yeah, like it could be the Maxine's, like something like that. Bring some new thing that is going to suck new viewers in and please old ones. And I know I'd like to do that. One more thing I want to talk about is Shin Hati
yeah,
and like the tragedy of Shin Hati. Like I think she was I think Balin wanted her to go with Thrawn and return. And because he's like
yeah.
he says something like to the tune of your ambitions give you a path that's apart from mine, and it's sort of like she has these power ambitions that's like only briefly talked about, but I think he thinks like if this is what you want, follow follow
He even
Thrawn.
says like your place is in the new
Yeah,
empire,
yeah,
all this kind of
yeah,
stuff, and yeah, that's fascinating because it does feel like maybe she should have gone on the Eye of Sion
right,
back to the galaxy because it seems like that's what was being set up. But now I wonder if that was a reshoot basically when she shows up at the bandit camp because maybe Filoni knowing that he won't be able to sadly won't be able to continue his story with
right,
Ray Stevenson's Balin Skull. He might have to have Shin Hati sort of move into that narrative space and continue that quest. And it just feels like maybe that wasn't what was set up,
yeah,
but that's where things ended up. So, which is cool. I mean,
yeah,
I think that's fine. I think it's really cool that Shin Hati would be like, oh, I miss my master so much that I want to go
yeah.
find him. I can't, even maybe deal with some attachment stuff there that can echo into Sabine and Anakin and all that other stuff too.
Yeah,
So
she probably doesn't. She doesn't trust witches, which is so funny. She keeps being like witches
yeah,
and
more
more
witches.
witches, and everyone's like,
What?
chill. Yeah,
I didn't sign up for
yeah.
this.
And then she doesn't even know Thrawn, and she doesn't have really any attachment to the Emperor. I mean, to the Empire. So it makes sense that she's just like, well, I don't really want to do that. Like, I don't have any home there, and without my master, I'm nothing. And so she's just like really pure Ronin right now, which obviously leads to some great things, but like it's
That
just a little
yeah.
heartbreaking. She's just like, I've been cast out by my master. It's like she's a lost puppy, and
I'm confused about the Padawan braid as well
yeah,
because why even why even do like make the braid unless you're going to have a rite of passage to then cut it and
yeah,
basically like if your master's never going to see you again,
right. Why not cut it then?
don't you think he would knight her before he go like
Yeah,
you know what I mean,
yeah.
like something you're already following it this close to the actual dogma. Wouldn't there be a moment where like there's some sort of evolution for her character?
Yeah,
And
that's a really good
there's just
point.
some weird. I have some questions about just like why he's training her so closely to the actual school of thought when he's going to leave her and just sort of like abandon the entire training process.
Yeah.
It's weird
Yeah,
to me. I don't
no,
get
that's
that.
a really good point because it's like, is she just a Jedi fangirl and she just did that on her own? Or is this, I mean, it could be Balin is like, if I controlled the Jedi, I would do it differently. But there's certain vestiges he would hold on to, and it's this master and apprentice role. Like, he agrees with that. But
Yeah.
it's like, there's something else there. I mean, that's, I think, more likely for me is that, Balin thinks he can just do it better.
Yeah, I trained you to be something more, which
Right.
is so tantalizing and cool. Like I love that line.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Right.
Obviously, it means like she doesn't, she's always going to show force and attack or whatever. But
Yeah.
anyways, we're running a little long.
Yeah, I have an idea.
Yeah,
I do want to go through the medal ceremony, and
yeah,
we
we'll do
also
those.
want to do another thing with the pillars, where I think we're going to go through and we're
Yeah.
actually going to do sort of a little rating thing with the pillars, and I guess it's more for us than anyone else, but how many pillars
Yeah.
we checked off. But I think why don't we wait till next week when we've got Adam back to
I
do
love
both of
that.
those
Yeah.
things, because I want to get his take
Okay.
on all this. And so we'll do a little another full wrap next week, and then move on to something else. And then probably in 2 weeks, I'd love to cover Rise of the Red Blade, that book, because it's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah, Delilah S. Dawson's Rise of the Red Blade.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be
that
great.
would be great. So we'll be doing that, I think, in 2 weeks. And next week, I think maybe we'll have a little interstitial episode where we do a wrap about everything that's been going on in Star Wars around the Ahsoka series that we haven't really got a chance to talk about.
No, totally. Yeah. I mean,
Good.
Skeleton Crew, Acolyte on the horizon. So surprised there was no like. I thought, well, maybe that's who's coming to save Sabine and Ahsoka is Jude Law.
That would be
Maybe
amazing.
that's the ride.
Yeah,
I'm wondering, but
that would be so fun.
yeah, we've got lots to talk about. There's comics. There's so much. Anyways, so medal ceremony this week, or you want to
I
wait for
think
Adam?
let's wait for Adam for both of those things,
Okay, let's
because
do it.
that'll
All
be a
right.
good way to fold Adam in. We'll let him sort of give his thoughts, and then we'll
Oh,
go through the medal
I
ceremony.
absolutely love that.
All right.
All right, what an app! What a combo! I feel like we really got to a lot of the narrative, threads there, the threads of fate,
Yeah.
and we really found out, we really talked about them, we really dissected them in a fun way. So I feel like I hope listeners like that.
Yeah, I do too, and
Yeah,
yeah, love to hear from you. And yeah.
and you have an album coming out, right?
Oh yeah, thanks. I have an album come out yesterday. It is a self-titled album. It's called Feed Us, all caps. It'll be a little tough to find for a while because there's other feeds out there, and it just launched, so it's new. But I'm gonna put a link into our thread here into our bio. So if you're interested, it's a Halloween party album. So if you like to party and you like Halloween, it's a full album of instrumental electronic music, Halloween party songs. Because my wife thought there wasn't enough of that out there, so I
Very
made it for her.
apt.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
apt, given we're talking about the season of the witch here in Star Wars.
yes,
So
yeah,
it's awesome that you're providing this to Halloween
yeah.
parties all around the globe. So or the country. That's great.
Yeah, and there'll be a YouTube video that's going to be it'll be a music video for the whole album
Oh, cool.
that my wife did.
Oh, very.
So you can just throw it on a TV, turn the volume up, and instant Halloween party. And I'm proud of it. It was a collaboration with one of my musical heroes in Boston, Nick Z, aka Zizza, and yeah.
Nice.
So it's great. I'm real proud of the album. Hopefully you'll start hearing it.
Congrats, man. That
pop
sounds
up
awesome.
places. Yeah, thanks very much, man. Appreciate it. All right, we will talk to you next week on another edition of
Cantina Chronicles.